There is a strange and unsettling paradox at the heart of our age. On the surface, life has never been easier. Most of us have food on the table, a roof overhead, and a world of digital entertainment at our fingertips. By almost every material measure, modern existence has reduced suffering in ways our ancestors could scarcely have imagined. And yet, beneath this blanket of comfort, something troubling stirs, a quiet sense of emptiness, a feeling that life has lost its sharpness, its urgency, its fire. Men in particular, once called to test themselves against the weight of necessity, now find themselves lulled into softness, not by cruelty, but by convenience. And here lies the paradox. The very comforts that promise freedom may in fact be binding us with invisible chains. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this danger more clearly than most. In his writings, he warned against what he called the last man, a figure who lives only for ease, who avoids struggle, risk, and greatness in exchange for comfort and safety. This last man believes he has won, but Nietzsche insists he has already surrendered. He has traded the possibility of meaning for the certainty of comfort. But Nietzsche was not alone in this warning. From the ancient Stoics, who taught that virtue is forged in hardship, to modern psychologists like Viktor Frankl, who argued that meaning is found in confronting life's challenges, thinkers across time have echoed this truth. When we eliminate all difficulty, we risk eliminating the very conditions that make us human. This video will be a journey into that paradox, a guided reflection on why modern comfort, seductive and gentle as it seems, may be eroding the soul of man. Along the way, we will explore 6 core insights drawn from philosophy and psychology, insights that reveal not only the danger of comfort, but also the path toward a deeper, more vital way of living. Because in the end, the question is not whether we should reject comfort altogether. The question is whether we can rediscover the courage to live in such a way that comfort serves us rather than destroys us. Picture this. A man wakes up in a climate-controlled room. He reaches for his phone, scrolls endlessly, eats food he didn't grow, earns money from tasks that rarely test his body or spirit, and at night he returns again to the glowing screens that numb his restless thoughts. Nothing dramatic threatens him. No wolf waits at the door, no battlefield, no famine, no frontier. His life is easier than that of kings from centuries past. And yet, he feels strangely lifeless. This is not just a modern complaint. It is the very figure Nietzsche foresaw in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the last man. The last man doesn't suffer greatly, but neither does he aspire to anything higher. He chooses comfort over greatness, ease over challenge, numbness over passion. Nietzsche saw this not as progress, but as decline, the quiet suicide of the human spirit, because it is struggle, not comfort, that shapes the soul. Hardship sharpens awareness. Challenge forces us to expand our limits. To Nietzsche, greatness requires the willingness to wrestle with existence, to accept suffering as the raw material of strength. Without this tension, life flattens into trivial routines, and the fire of vitality dies out. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Struggle, far from being an obstacle, is the furnace in which character is forged. Comfort, in contrast, is a soft bed that slowly lulls the spirit into paralysis. Consider even biology. Muscles atrophy without resistance. The immune system weakens without exposure. Minds grow dull without intellectual strain. Just as steel is tempered by fire, the human being is honed through difficulty. Comfort is not neutral. It corrodes us silently when it becomes the default condition of life. But here's the hidden danger. Modern society doesn't just offer comfort, it celebrates it. We are told that the highest goal is convenience, the smooth life where every friction is removed. Yet friction is precisely what awakens us. To eliminate it entirely is to eliminate the conditions of growth itself. Think of the men who shaped history, explorers who braved unknown seas, thinkers who questioned dangerous truths, leaders who bore immense responsibility. None of them were products of comfort. They were tested by resistance, sharpened by necessity. Nietzsche's challenge is simple but radical. Without struggle, there is no greatness. Without resistance, there is no depth. So the paradox stands before us. The modern world gives us ease, but robs us of the very fuel that makes life meaningful. To accept endless comfort is to accept decline. To seek struggle willingly is to remain alive in the deepest sense. And so, I leave you with a question to carry. If your days are filled with ease, where is the struggle that shapes you? If comfort has become the norm, where will you find the fire that keeps the soul awake? There's an old story told about a young warrior who before battle was stripped of his weapons and thrown into the forest. His elders told him, "If you return, you will return as a man. If you don't, you were never meant to." The point wasn't cruelty. It was transformation. By being pushed to the edges of fear, hunger, and exhaustion, the warrior would discover not only what he could endure, but also who he truly was. Contrast this with our modern life. Few men are ever pushed to those edges. The forest is replaced by climate-controlled apartments. The trials of survival replaced by automated convenience. The risk of collapse, failure, or death rarely enters the picture. On the surface, this feels like progress, and it is, but there is a hidden cost. Without hardship, a man's deeper identity often remains undiscovered, lying dormant beneath the soft layers of routine. Carl Jung warned about this in his exploration of the unconscious. He argued that each person carries within them a vast reservoir of potential, what he called the self. But this deeper self is not revealed in comfort. It surfaces only when the ego is shaken, when life throws us into struggles so profound that our old ways of being can no longer carry us. Hardship acts like a mirror, showing us the parts of ourselves we never knew existed. Think about moments when you've been tested, a sudden loss, a health scare, a betrayal. In those moments, didn't you feel yourself waking up, stripped of illusions? You became raw, painfully present, strangely aware. This is the paradox. Comfort conceals us from ourselves, but hardship reveals us. Nietzsche captured this with his brutal clarity. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, but to discover that why, one must first be pressed against the limits of endurance. Without this confrontation, life becomes shallow, identity remains untested, and the man drifts like a ship that never leaves the harbor. Modern psychology echoes this. Post-traumatic growth research shows that individuals often emerge from suffering with greater resilience, clarity, and purpose than before. It is not comfort that unlocks their strength, but the trial by fire. Society, however, tells men the opposite, that struggle is unnecessary, that safety is the highest good, that life should be engineered to remove every discomfort. And so many accept the quiet prison of convenience. They never climb the inner mountain. They never discover what they are made of. Ask yourself, how would you know your courage if nothing ever frightened you? How would you know your strength if nothing ever demanded it? How would you know your depth if nothing ever broke you open? The uncomfortable truth is this: a man without hardship forgets who he is because he never really meets himself. His days remain flat, his soul untested, his identity unformed. He may live long, but he never truly lives. If this resonates, pause for a moment, consider subscribing, because every week we explore these timeless questions, the ones modern life often hides, but which determine whether we live shallowly or with real depth. And as we move forward, we'll turn to an even darker paradox, that pleasure, when stripped of purpose, ceases to be nourishment and becomes a subtle poison. Imagine a man who spends his evenings sinking into the glow of endless entertainment, streaming shows, scrolling feeds, ordering food with a tap. None of these things are inherently evil. In moderation, they are small joys. But notice what happens when they cease to be treats and become the very structure of life. Pleasure, once a spark, turns into a fog. Epicurus, the ancient philosopher so often misunderstood, warned of this exact trap. Though his name is associated with indulgence, Epicurus actually taught that pleasure, to be meaningful, must be chosen wisely. He distinguished between higher pleasures that nourish the soul, friendship, contemplation, meaningful effort, and lower pleasures that enslave us. He knew what we forget: when pleasure is pursued without purpose, it quickly becomes poison. Nietzsche sharpened this warning. He saw that societies bent on comfort inevitably slip into nihilism, a quiet despair masked by distraction. Men no longer ask, "What am I living for?" but instead ask, "What will entertain me next?" In this way, endless pleasure becomes not the reward of life, but its replacement. Psychology confirms what the philosophers intuited. Research on the brain's reward system shows that unearned or excessive dopamine dulls our sensitivity to joy. Just as a man who consumes sugar constantly loses the taste for natural sweetness, the man who lives on shallow pleasures loses his ability to savor real fulfillment. He needs more stimulation for less satisfaction. Pleasure, in this sense, begins to rot him from within. The paradox is that modern comfort gives us exactly this: endless access to stimulation without struggle, food without farming, connection without intimacy, entertainment without effort. And so men drift into lives that look easy, yet feel strangely hollow. But there is another path, the path of purposeful pleasure. This is the kind of joy that follows effort, that emerges as the reward of discipline, creativity, or sacrifice. The satisfaction of finishing a difficult workout, the sweetness of a meal after long hunger, the quiet joy of rest after hard work. These are pleasures with meaning because they are earned, not consumed passively. Here we return to a core truth. Comfort and pleasure are not wrong, but they are dangerous when divorced from purpose. Pleasure must be tied to meaning, or it becomes decay. Nietzsche would say, the man of the future must learn to transmute pleasure, to elevate it, to tie it to creation, to struggle, to growth. Otherwise, he becomes the last man, blinking into the screen, waiting for life to pass by. Ask yourself, The pleasures you indulge in daily, are they strengthening you or weakening you? Do they leave you fuller or emptier? Do they sharpen your sense of self or dissolve it? Because this is the silent crisis of our age. Men are not being destroyed by pain, but by pleasure without meaning. And this brings us to an even more unsettling truth, that the comfort system of modern society does not merely seduce us into weakness, it actively rewards it. The very structure of our world is built to keep us passive, docile, and controllable. You wake, you clock in, you perform tasks that may or may not stir your spirit, and you are rewarded not for greatness, not for daring, but for compliance. The paycheck arrives not because you risked yourself in pursuit of truth or beauty, but because you followed the system's rules. Comfort flows, but greatness is quietly starved. This is no accident. Thomas Hobbes argued that society is built to suppress conflict, to contain the violent, unpredictable energy of individuals. To maintain order, men must be tamed. Michel Foucault later sharpened this observation. Modern institutions, schools, workplaces, prisons, even hospitals, are designed to produce docile bodies, individuals who are efficient, predictable, and easy to manage. And what is the most effective tool of domestication? Not whips or chains, not cruelty or fear, but comfort. The man who is made comfortable has little reason to rebel. The man who is entertained, fed, and numbed by small pleasures rarely asks the dangerous questions. He may sense his own decay, but as long as the couch is soft and the screens are glowing, he seldom rises against it. Nietzsche saw this coming. He feared that democracy, mass culture, and the march toward ease would create a society of last men, content, safe, and utterly forgetful of greatness. These men do not seek to rise above themselves because society has trained them to be satisfied with mediocrity, so long as it is comfortable. Think of the workplace. Truly great work often requires vision, risk, even disobedience, but modern systems tend to punish such traits. Initiative that challenges authority is branded as insubordination. Vision that disrupts efficiency is sidelined. What is rewarded? Punctuality, compliance, quiet participation. The machine does not want lions, it wants sheep. And this passivity is not confined to work. It seeps into culture. Modern politics thrives on disengagement. Mass media thrives on passive consumption. Consumerism thrives on obedient buyers who accept whatever trend is marketed to them. Everywhere, the man who questions too deeply or strives too greatly is subtly pushed to the margins. But here lies the deeper danger. When men are trained for passivity, they forget they are capable of more. Over time, their horizons shrink. They no longer imagine greatness. They no longer long for it. They trade their birthright of struggle and transformation for a lifetime subscription to convenience. Nietzsche's warning becomes sharp here. He who cannot command himself will be commanded. A man who does not rise above passivity will be shaped by the forces around him until he becomes a product, not a person. So the challenge is clear: to see through the machine's rewards, to recognize that the comfort offered by society often has a price tag: your vitality, your freedom, your greatness. Ask yourself, are you being rewarded for your strength or for your obedience? Are you praised for your courage or for your conformity? Is the comfort you enjoy a gift or a leash? Because if society rewards passivity, then the path to true freedom must lie in the opposite direction. And that is where we now turn to the unsettling truth that freedom does not begin in comfort, but at the very edge of it. Imagine standing on a cliff edge. Behind you lies the village, safe, familiar, predictable. Before you stretches an unknown wilderness, vast and untamed. Every instinct tells you to turn back, to stay where life is comfortable. And yet, something in you whispers, step forward. This is the essence of freedom, not the freedom of comfort, which is only the freedom to choose between flavors of distraction, but the freedom of risk, the freedom that comes when we step beyond the boundaries of what is safe. Kierkegaard called this the dizziness of freedom. He believed that true individuality only awakens when we confront uncertainty. Most people, he said, escape into the crowd, into routines that protect them from anxiety. But the man who dares to face his own freedom, who accepts the burden of choice with no guarantees, becomes truly alive. Camus echoed this with his notion of the absurd. Life, he argued, has no predetermined meaning. To live authentically is to confront this emptiness and to create meaning in spite of it. But such freedom can never be found in comfort, because comfort is precisely the avoidance of risk, the escape from uncertainty. Modern comfort gives us the illusion of freedom. We can choose from thousands of movies, hundreds of brands, endless forms of entertainment. But these choices are trivial. They cost us nothing. They do not shape who we are. The freedom that matters, the freedom to create ourselves, to define our destiny, to take risks that may break us or elevate us, begins only when comfort ends. Think of a time you took a risk, moving to a new city, starting a venture, confessing love, speaking an unpopular truth. For a moment, you were terrified. Yet in that fear, you also felt something rare, a raw aliveness that is freedom, the freedom to step beyond comfort into the unknown, to stake yourself on something uncertain, and in the process, to become more than you were before. Nietzsche urged this above all, to embrace life as a constant act of overcoming. Become who you are, he wrote, a command that requires us to wrestle with risk, to break out of the safety of conformity, to carve meaning with our own hands. The man who clings to comfort never becomes who he is. He remains a shadow of possibility. Psychology supports this. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow shows that deep fulfillment arises not from ease, but from challenge, from stretching ourselves beyond what is comfortable into a state of risk-infused engagement. Freedom, in this sense, is not escape from difficulty. It is the act of choosing difficulty willingly. Here's the paradox. Comfort feels like safety, but it is often a cage. Risk feels like danger, but it is often the birthplace of freedom. The question is whether we are willing to step beyond the false freedom of comfort into the real freedom of responsibility, risk, and creation. So I ask you, where are you mistaking comfort for freedom? And what step, however small, might lead you from safety into the wilderness where true freedom waits? Because only by taking that step can we prepare for the final, hardest truth of all, that the path forward is not just about enduring struggle, but about choosing it. Voluntary struggle is not a burden. It is the key to becoming fully alive. There is a profound difference between the suffering that life imposes on us and the struggle we willingly choose. The first arrives uninvited: illness, betrayal, loss. The second, however, is born of decision, the conscious act of stepping into difficulty, not because we must, but because we know it is the only way to grow. Nietzsche believed this voluntary struggle was the essence of becoming. His image of the Übermensch, the higher man, was not someone spared from pain, but someone who transforms pain into power. Life, he insisted, will never be free of suffering. But the noble man does not merely endure. He takes suffering into his hands, shapes it, and says, "This is mine." Consider the difference. The man who avoids all difficulty may live in comfort, but his soul remains small. The man who accepts imposed suffering may survive, but he is still at the mercy of chance. But the man who chooses his struggle, who climbs mountains, not because he must, but because he wills it, becomes free. His suffering is no longer meaningless. It is self-authored. Modern psychology mirrors this. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the concentration camps, wrote that man's deepest need is not pleasure, but meaning, and meaning often arises from suffering. But the key, Frankl argued, is how we relate to that suffering. Chosen struggle, whether in work, discipline, or sacrifice, gives us direction. It transforms pain into purpose. Think of the athlete who trains beyond exhaustion, not because he must, but because he has chosen excellence. Think of the father who rises each day to provide, not because it is easy, but because he has chosen responsibility. Think of the artist who wrestles with his craft for years, not for comfort, but for the fire of creation. These men live heavier lives, but also deeper ones. This is the paradox. Nietzsche forces us to face the path to greatness is not paved with ease, but with chosen hardship. Voluntary struggle is the antidote to the poison of modern comfort. It sharpens the spirit, awakens identity, purifies pleasure, resists passivity, and leads us into true freedom. But here is the challenge. The modern world will not ask this of you. No one will force you to climb mountains, to discipline your body, to pursue truth, to endure solitude. In fact, the world will offer you the opposite: shortcuts, comforts, distractions, endless ways to avoid struggle. And so the burden falls on you alone. Voluntary struggle may mean deliberately choosing discomfort in small ways, rising early, exercising discipline, confronting difficult truths, setting ambitious goals. Nietzsche's call is as urgent now as it was in his time. Do not become the last man. Do not settle for a life of ease that erodes your spirit. Instead, embrace the weight of existence. Choose the harder path, for in struggle you will find not only strength, but also the raw intensity of being fully alive. So ask yourself, what struggle will you choose? Not the ones life imposes, but the ones that call to you, the ones that demand courage. For it is only there in voluntary struggle that the chains of comfort are broken, and the possibility of greatness begins. We began with a paradox that in the age of unprecedented ease, many men feel more restless, hollow, and diminished than ever before. Comfort, which promised freedom, has instead dulled the spirit. Nietzsche foresaw this danger in the image of the last man, a figure who avoids struggle, avoids risk, avoids greatness, and in so doing loses himself. Across our journey, we explored 6 insights, 6 revelations that unmask this paradox and point us toward a harder but more vital path. First, we saw that comfort dulls the spirit, while struggle sharpens it. Ease corrodes the soul, resistance awakens it. Second, we uncovered that a man without hardship forgets who he is. Only in difficulty does the deeper self reveal itself. Third, we learned that pleasure without purpose becomes poison. Comfort untied from meaning breeds despair, not joy. Fourth, we saw how the machine of society rewards passivity, not greatness. Comfort is not neutral. It is often a leash disguised as a gift. Fifth, we realized that true freedom begins where comfort ends. To step into risk and uncertainty is to taste the raw aliveness of existence. And sixth, we ended with the truth that the path forward is voluntary struggle. By choosing hardship, we seize authorship of our suffering, and in so doing, we create ourselves. These are not abstract ideas. They are the map of a different way of living, a life where comfort no longer destroys us, but instead becomes the rest we earn after the storm. A life where we embrace the weight of existence and discover, in that weight, the possibility of greatness. But here is the challenge. No one will choose this for you. The world will happily let you drift, numbed by distractions, softened by ease, quietly sliding into the destiny of the last man. The invitation to live differently must come from within. So let me leave you with this question. What would it mean for you to step willingly into struggle, to reject the path of comfort, not out of self-denial, but out of a higher yes, a yes to growth, to risk, to the possibility of becoming more than you are today? Because the world does not need more last men. It does not need more passive consumers of ease. It needs individuals willing to carry weight, to face hardship, to shape themselves against resistance. It needs men who choose struggle, not because they must, but because they know that only through struggle does freedom, meaning, and vitality emerge. This is Nietzsche's warning and his challenge. Comfort can destroy you, but chosen struggle can redeem you. If these reflections resonate, consider subscribing. Each week we walk together through questions like these, questions our culture avoids, but which quietly shape the quality of our lives. And I invite you to share your own reflections below, because this is not just a monologue, it is a shared journey. A gathering of those who refuse to drift quietly into comfort and who instead dare to live deeply. The path is not easy, but it is yours to choose. And perhaps in choosing it, you will not only save yourself from comfort's decay, but become the kind of person the world quietly longs for.